Hello students, today we're going to talk about equations with variables on both sides. Let's get right into it. The idea is you're going to have the same variable on both sides of the equal sign. And why is that important? Well, just like everything, simplifying, distributing, combining like terms, we are going to do the exact same thing. But of course, in this case, we're going to have to kind of be going back and forth over the equal sign. Now, one thing I want to explain before we get started, anytime that you, are going to move some amount of a variable, in this case like 3x or 5x, you have to pick, like, which one should I move to the other side of the equal sign? Well, what I'm going to suggest is that you always try to subtract, if possible, subtract the amount, like in this case, if we subtract negative 3x, right, on both sides, 5 minus 3, it gets you a positive answer here. That's what I'm going to suggest you try to do, okay? Now, if you did it the other way, would the problem be wrong? Absolutely not. So, but I'm going to suggest we work it that way. So, let's go through this problem. The idea is the same as what you've been doing with the equations. We always want a variable on one side, and then we'll get our numbers on the other. Okay? Variable on one, and then numbers on the other. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to subtract the negative 3x from both sides. This goes to 0. We do our subtraction, negative 2x minus 2 equals 4. And then from there, we are going to add 2 to both sides so that this goes to 0, and we are just left with 2x equals 6. From there, we would divide both sides by 2. 6 divided by 2, of course, is 3, and we are done. So let's just take a look at an example. In this case, we have 2 and then parentheses, 1.5y plus 6 equals 5.5y. So what you can see is we do have this variable y on both sides of the equal sign. What do we have to do first? Well, in this case, we are going to do our distribution first. So let's do that. 2 times 1.5 will just be 3y. 2 times 6 is 12, and we have our 5.5y. Now, I mentioned it over here. If we subtracted 3y from both sides, well, it would be 5.5 minus 3. That would give us a positive answer. If we did the opposite, if we subtracted the 5.5 from both sides, well, that would give us a negative answer. And in this case, I want to show you something. If we did this, 5.5y, okay, so if we did this, what would happen? Well, we would have a negative 2.5y plus 12. But this is sometimes confusing. What happens if you do subtract everything on the right side? This is everything on the right side of the equation. Well, you just have a 0 here now. So just in case you ever run across this, that's what happens. I want to make sure, and a lot of times that it confuses students. But the obvious choice in this case would be to subtract the 3. So if we subtract the 3y, this goes to 0, and we do the same thing over here. Of course, that's going to be the best way to do it because we're now just left with the number on the left, and we are left with a 2.5y on the right-hand side. And that's perfect because then we can divide both sides by 2.5. Right? This changes to just a 1, and now we have our y. So I'm going to quickly run through this division problem just to make sure. So 12 divided by 2.5. Remember, we never want to divide by decimal, so we will move the decimal, and we have to do the same thing here. So this is our new decimal point, and we're always going to have to add a 0 if need be. So I would highly suggest always rewriting the problem so that things are really nice and clean and clear. So, does 25 go into 12? No. Does it go into 120? Yes. It goes in 4 times. So we'll subtract off 100, and we are left with 20. We drop down the 0. So 25 divides into 208 times. And there we go. Remainder 0. That's what we wanted. So our final answer is y equals 4.8. So in summary, first do the distribution. Then anytime you have the same variable on both sides of the equation, move or subtract or move that variable to the other side so that you can hopefully get a positive answer. That will make life easier. So let's take a look at some other problems. Here we have brackets on both sides of the equations, or parentheses. And anytime you have, remember, a number next to the brackets or parentheses, it means multiplication. So that's exactly what they did here. They first did their distribution. That's step number one, is to distribute. And once they have done that, now they do have the same variable on both sides of the equal sign. And it's just a matter of picking which variable you want to move. And they chose to subtract off negative 2n. And of course, they did that because this will go to 0. And here we'll have a positive variable amount of n's left. And that just usually makes life easier. Now, from this point on, we have our number. So we'll subtract 5. That goes to 0. And we'll subtract 5. So we're left with 3n equals 15. From here, we divide both sides by 3, and we get our answer, n equals 5. So it's really distribution first, and then the two-step equation, either adding or subtracting, and then either multiplying or dividing. In our last example, I'll say it again, think about combining like terms, distributing, and simplifying, if you can. So in this problem, there's just a lot going on. And it would really make life easier, right? We have the same variable on the same side of the equal sign. So we can get started by just doing that. So we have 6 minus 21 plus 3. All right, so really it's like saying negative 21 plus 3. This is the bigger number, so we know our answer is negative. And then we just do our subtraction, and we get 18. So we have minus 18m. And now let's take a look on the other side. What's going on here? Well, we have a number minus this thing in parentheses. Now, remember, when you have minus, you can always think of it as minus 1, and then there's multiplication here. So you're really distributing a negative 1 to everything that's inside. That's really what you should think about. Or even just distributing the negative sign to everything that's inside. So let's kind of just do that. So we have our number, negative 2, minus 1, or negative 1 times 1 is just negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 2 will be positive 2m. Right, negative times negative is positive. So that can be a little bit tricky. Now we're back to a problem where we have the same variable on both sides of the equal sign, on both sides of this equal sign. So we got to choose. What do we want to do here? Oop. I don't know if you noticed this. I skipped a step. What did I completely miss? Well, we have negative 2 minus 1. We want to combine like terms. So let's do that. You got to take your time. Negative 2 minus 1. Well, they're both negative, so we add them up. So we have negative 3. Now we can get into the problem, okay? We have the same variable on both sides. So if we move a negative 18, so this would be plus 18m, plus 18m, it would give us a positive answer. And I think that's what we always want to strive for with our variable. So we have 6 equals negative 3 plus 20m. Get the variable on one side. And in this case, we have a negative 3. So to get this to go to 0, we have to add 3 on both sides. And we have 9 equals 20m. And to finally get m by itself, we divide both sides by 20. And we are left with 9 over 20 equals m. And there we go. So really got to take your time, but always combine like terms, especially with this example right here. Combining like terms in the beginning. And always do your distribution in the beginning.